All right, so we're hanging out here with the sub here at my church, and I want to take a quick moment to talk about this concept of doing subs on an aux. We were just talking about auxes and groups and mixes and how we can use them to be buckets to collect certain sounds, mix them, and do what we need to do to process them, and then we can put them out to where they need to go to a destination, right? So some people like to take subs and put them on an aux and be a receiver of just certain instruments and channels from their board. So, for example, some people like to just send bass guitar, kick drum, and maybe some low-end pads or whatever, synths, whatever, to an aux separate from the main left-right mix, and then designate that aux to a sub so that way they can actually have a single fader controlling just the sub mix, and only the instruments that they want are going to the subs. So why would you do this? Well, you don't necessarily want a vocal or a guitar going to a sub because, A, you don't need 80 hertz of a vocal. You don't need 60 hertz of guitar. In fact, a lot of times they don't sound good or there are frequencies that are just unnecessary. In fact, if anything, they're going to muddy up your subs because your subs are trying to focus on their main things, which are going to be kicks, kick drums, bass guitars, and stuff like that. So instead, we want the information that we would have generally coming from those sources going to our mains. So by doing this, we ensure that none of that is actually going to go to the subs. The other chance, too, is we get to actually mix or control the level output of the subs. So if there's a moment where we want to boost the subs, we can do that. Or if we need to pull them back, we can. We have that control at front of house. It's not dictated by the amplifier or anything else. Now, the reason why I'm not always 100% on board with this is because, well, I find that you don't need to do this when you actually do your setup proper. By doing two things, one, setting your crossover correctly, and two, using your high-pass filter correctly, that's all taken care of for you, and you don't have to worry about, oh, is my vocal going to my sub? Oh, do I have too much low end or not enough low end? That's all controlled by those two things. So let's talk about the first one, crossovers. Crossover is at what point in your system does it go from your mains to your subs? So that's usually handled by a system processor. And that system processor has a point where it says in the frequency spectrum, usually between 80 hertz and 150, what point do we want to start beginning to go into the sub range and then completely hand everything off to the subs? Because we have two speakers for a reason. We have mains, which handle high frequencies and high mids and low mids. And then we have a sub that does its job of focusing on just the low frequencies, which the reason why these speakers are so much bigger is because there's so much more energy and power needed to move those low frequencies in a room. You need to have a big speaker to handle that, to be able to push that air because 80 hertz, 60 hertz, 40 hertz is a big sound wave, and you need a lot of power to make that happen in a live sound reinforcement system. So by doing that, we actually can use the we can use the crossover point to say at this frequency point, send it to here and call it a day. By doing that though, we also have now a point where we can use a high pass filter to say, hey, at this point, stop sending to the subs and only send it to the mains. If you're trying to send 150 hertz or 125 hertz, whatever your crossover point is, to your mains, well, why? You've already got a sub that's designed to handle that. You don't need it. You're basically needing to treat this as a part of your sound system. It should be treated as one part because they're doing the job together because you've already set your processor to make everything work together as one. So by using your high pass filter, we say, hey, you don't need to worry about sending it to the sub, just send it to the mains and it's going to sound great because it's already tuned correctly and we know it's going to work. By using then EQs, if you need to boost low end, if you've got your high pass filter down, but you need more low end, just grab your EQ filter, turn up 80, 100 hertz or whatever you need, and that's going to boost it to this sub speaker. Or if you have too much of the low end, but you need it there, pull it down. Use a shelf EQ if you need to and pull that EQ down just to pull less information out of the main signal to go to the subs. That's the whole idea here behind high pass filters and crossovers. So in a studio environment, there's only two channels at the end of the day that come out and that gets printed to whatever's going to Spotify, iTunes, a CD, whatever. You have your left channel and your right channel. And both of those contain information from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And that's it. There's no sub channel. There's no, this is specifically designed to go to the subwoofer and that's it. There are formats out there that do exist for that, but in music, 99% of the time, it's only going to be left and right. So how do they choose what goes to the subs? How does the engineer for the record know, hey, this is only for subs? Well, they're reliant on the manufacturer of whatever headphone or amplifier system that the music's going to be coming through to have an accurate and good crossover point. And they've set their high pass filters in their mix to say, okay, vocals, I don't need any of that going to the subs, so I'm just going to high pass filter it to 150 hertz, 200 hertz, and know that that information is not going to get reproduced in the low end because it's not needed. Same with kick drum. If I need more kick drum in the low end mix, I need more kick thump in my subs. Well, I'm going to boost it with my EQ. I'm going to boost 80 hertz because I know that that's what's going to be sent to the subs, and it's going to be at the volume I need it to be. So all this to say, there's a time and place for using subs on an aux. I believe that if you've got your system tuned correctly, you've got your crossover set correctly, and you're using your high pass filters correctly, then there's no reason to put subs on an aux. However, if you're in a system or a place where you just need that extra flexibility, that extra control because the system's not tuned properly or things just aren't playing right, maybe subs on an aux does make sense. There's a time and place for it, but if you've got all those other things taken care of, you're in a good spot and you really don't need to worry about putting them on an aux. Let's go to the next lesson.